are all concerned about the impact of this pandemic to our international development relationship. My name is Nina Sarjonani. I will be the moderator for this morning's talk show. I'm the expert coordinator at the Sustainable Development Goals National Secretariat in Bappenas since 2016. Prior to that, I had more than 30 years experiences in Bappenas and was the Deputy Minister of National Development Planning for Human Resources and Cultural Affairs for almost 9 years, as well as the expert staff of the Minister of National Development Planning for Human Development and Poverty Eradication. This morning discussion is hosted by Knowledge Sector Initiative, or KSI, in collaboration with Bappenas. KSI is a partnership between the Australian and Indonesian governments that supports better use of evidence in policy making. KSI tagline is Better Policies, Better Lives. KSIxChange is a series of monthly informal sharing sessions on different topics around Indonesia's knowledge sector. It is an opportunity to hear from KSI partners on updates, practices, findings, and learnings around evidence-informed policymaking in Indonesia. Before I introduce our prominent panelists, I would like to inform a few housekeeping about this webinar regarding the security concerns. First, this discussion is using webinar format in Zoom, and the organizer has disabled some features like share screen and sending personal chat between participants. Second, please type and send your question in the Q&A box. I ask you to state your question first, then give us 1 or 2 sentences to help us understand the context. If you would like a specific panelist to answer the question, please mention the name of the panelist first, then the question, then the context. Third, you can also participate in the discussion through asumsi.co YouTube platform if you feel more comfortable that way. A quick rundown today, at first, is His Excellency Bapak Suharto Monoarfa, the Minister of National Development Planning, Head of National Development Planning Agency or Bappenas, to give an opening address. And it will be followed by an overview from Bappenas by Pak Leonard Tampubolon, the Deputy Minister for Development Funding, for about 10 minutes. Then the next session is the Q&A with all the panelists in a talk show format, where I will ask each panelist with a set of questions for around 85 minutes. Due to time constraint, I should apologize that we expect the panelists to provide answer for approximately 3 minutes. Let me first greet all of the honorable panelists. Good morning, selamat pagi, Bapak Ibu. His Excellency Kim Chang-byum, the Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Indonesia. His Excellency Peter Schoof, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Indonesia. His Excellency Alistair Cox, Charge d'Affaires, Australian Embassy to Indonesia. World Bank Country Director for Indonesia and Timor-Leste, Ibu Satu Kahkonen. And Country Director, Indonesia Residence Mission of Asian Development Bank, Bapak Winfried F. Wicklin. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome His Excellency, Minister of National Development Planning, Head of Bappenas, Bapak Suharto Monoarfa, to officially open this discussion. And now the time is yours, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, Kim Chang-boom, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea, Your Excellency Peter Schoof, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, Mr. Alistair Cox, Charge d'Affaires of Australian Embassy, Honorable Satu Kah Conant, World Bank Country Director, Honorable Winfried Wickley, Country Director of Asian Development Bank, colleague, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic is a wake-up call for the world, including Indonesia. We realize that our world is vulnerable to this pandemic, and we have to act swiftly to minimize its impact on our health and the economy. COVID crisis is a global challenge that we have to overcome together. Not a single country has yet mastered in solving this crisis. Everyone is still learning and trying something new to flatten the virus transmission and to save the human life as many as possible. Indonesia is to constantly learning from success story from countries that have managed to contain the COVID pandemic. Some of the lessons learned are the use of data and science as the basis of decision making. Restriction of people movement are carried out through several phases and zones. The implementation of health protocols has to be guarded with a discipline by people and strict supervision. And the last, the relaxation of people movement restriction should be revisited and reapplied if the protocols are not adhered to. But the underlying key in a successful implementation of those lessons is the collaboration among countries in addressing these wide-reaching trials. Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, we understand the importance of saving human life as the top priority. The health crisis and virus containment have to be addressed first, as the economic recovery will follow suit after the spread of the virus can be contained. It is without doubt that measures enacted by most countries in containing the virus have massive consequences to its economy. The measures attack almost every enterprise and economic activities. Those economic effects extend across countries through the channel of global production networks and interrupted and distracted financial markets. But we don't have any option. Combating the COVID crisis needs collaborative and concrete action. We have to work together, and ideally, every country is to provide rapid responses to cure infected patients and suspected persons, as well as to provide sufficient health facilities and surveillance. However, some countries do not have enough resources and technology for such rapid action. Some countries are quite advanced in containing the virus, but others are lagging. WHO advised that countries can consider easing to its social restriction when it can provide: first, virus transmission is controlled; second, health system capacities are in place to detect, test, isolate, and treat every COVID case; third, outbreak risk can be minimized; and number 4, preventive measures are enforced in workplaces, schools, and other places where crowd exists as well. As the last one, communities are fully educated, engaged, and empowered to adjust to the new norm. Responding to the pandemic at hand, Indonesia has also realigned our development plan for 2021 to attend to the issues of economic recovery and social reform. The four main areas of development in 2021 are: number one, recovery of industry, tourism, and investment. Number two, national health system reform. Number three, social system reform. And number four, disaster resilience system reform. Ladies and gentlemen, whether we like it or not, we are currently entering a new normal. The new normal means COVID safe protocol are to be rigorously imposed, while the society will become more contactless and cashless, or so-called less mobile society. Digital technology will be the backbone of our near future life, while economic and social transformation will occur in all countries. Indonesia, of course, cannot enter the new normal by herself. We have to go through it together with others. And it is very timely to have this event to share and envisage our concrete ideas for the future of our development cooperation in response to this challenge. Bappenas is mandated to provide the nation's annual, medium-term, and long-term planning documents. Therefore, Bappenas is strategically in position to prepare the country and society to embrace the new normal and address the country's coming challenges. Therefore, it is imperative for us to immediately strengthen our collaboration efforts by adopting the new styles of partnership in this new normal. Flexibility and adjustment in terms of policy, strategy, and governance in our development cooperation must be taken into consideration by all parties involved. The new normal is also an opportunity to translate the conventional relationship previously only between development partners and recipient countries into a multi-stakeholders partnership. This new approach of partnership is expected to provide a collaboration platform among government, development partners, private sectors, academia, and the civil society to support the inclusive development in Indonesia. In conclusion, I would like to re-emphasize that development cooperation must also enter a new normal where it has to go beyond traditional corridors. Development cooperation has to be strategically positioned in this new context and situation. Bappenas' strategic leadership in development planning can be a trigger to reshape the future of development cooperation. Bappenas stands ready for it, as we strongly believe that the new normal is an opportunity to shape new partnership for a better life of the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your invaluable vision of the new normal, Your Excellency. The Minister, unfortunately, will not be joining us for the rest of the discussion as he has other agenda. Once again, thank you, Bapak Menteri, for opening this discussion, and it has been a really pleasure to having you in this important webinar. This pandemic has provided many lessons learned, which have pointed toward a new system, one that is more reliable and adaptable to the pandemic situation. In other words, COVID-19 pandemic has given rise an awareness about the importance of efforts to redesign the development cooperation system, which includes new design in a new normal regarding policies and focus, strategies, as well as governance of implementing development cooperation. Let us welcome Pak Leonard Tampu Bolon to provide Bappenas overview and strategy for development cooperation in the new normal. Paleo, can you please elaborate more on what is the position of Bappenas regarding the implementation of development cooperation today and as represented in the implementation of ongoing development projects? Paleo, the time is yours, Pak.
Thank you, Ibu Nina. Your Excellency Kim Chang-byom, Ambassador for the Republic of Korea. Your Excellency Peter Skov, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany. Your Excellency Alistair Cox, Charge Affairs of Australian Embassy. Honorable Satu Kohkonen, World Bank Director, World Bank Country Director. Honorable Winfried Wicklin, Country Director of Asian Development Bank. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, before answering the question of Ibu Nina, I would like to take this opportunity to express our appreciation to our development partner, including the ones that are participating in the webinar today, for their prompt response to support our challenging endeavor in tackling the COVID-19 pandemic. As my Minister Suarso said in these remarks, our government has been taking various necessary policy and measures to prevent and control the spread of COVID-19, as well as to ameliorate the negative impact of the pandemic on the people's life and the country economy. In general, our policy to respond COVID-19 consists of 4 strategies. The focus on the first stage to respond COVID-19 consists of strengthening health facilities. The main agenda of the second stage is protection of vulnerable society and business. The third stage is dedicated for increasing the pressure on the financial sector. In this regard, the first 3 stages are expected to be conducted in 2020. Whereas the last stage, which is post-COVID-19 pandemic recovery program, will be done in 2021 and subsequent years. The government of Indonesia has issued some policy and measures to prepare our gradual transition in the new normal, which is necessary for us continue living our life to the fullest while our researchers are still working hard to find the vaccine to prevent and cure the COVID-19. In the context of our collaboration with the international community and our development partner, I would like to share 4 things as our position on development cooperation in the new normal era. The first is strengthening and adjusting the policy and strategy of international development cooperation in the new normal. This is necessity, not an option. There are 3 factors that could exist to support effective development cooperation in the new normal era. Those are policy, strategy, and governance. Resetting our national priorities, focus, and strategy is very important and cannot be avoided. Social and economic recovery and health security will need to be strengthened and integrated with other sectors such as basic infrastructure, tourism sector, micro, small, and medium enterprises, and the domestic industry. The critical issue that needs to be highlighted is how can the international partner support Indonesia bounce back? So it is our expectation that our development partner will support the adjustment in our development priorities to combat COVID-19 pandemic and its impact. We appreciate the emergency response package adopted by our development partner. We further call for a swift implementation of those packages on most favorable terms. The second one is no disruption to the implementation of our committed development cooperation plan. It is hoped that the pandemic will not negatively affect the implementation of our development cooperation plan that have been committed before the pandemic occurred. Our government, of course, understand if our development partner are required to make some adjustment in our development cooperation. However, it is expected that this adjustment to be in line with our government agenda or policy in the new normal era. The third one is multi-sector partnership in development cooperation more is a must. The COVID-19 pandemic is adding more hassle in the implementation of development process due to scarce financial resources, technology obstacle, lack of data, and restriction of mobility. Indonesia would not be alone to get into this hard situation, since the complexity of the situation living in the new normal era requires a meaningful multi-stakeholder partnership as a new approach in providing a meaningful collaboration of platform among government, development partner, private sector, academia, and civil society to support inclusive development in Indonesia. The fourth one is the adoption of new health standard protocol should not be the counterproductive for the implementation of our development cooperation. Things that are counterproductive for our development cooperation included but not limited to the increase to the project cost, such as time, mobility, and resources. Therefore, we need to work together to identify and develop some mitigation measure in and at operational level. For example, restriction of mobility will certainly affect project operational process, and the application of health protocols such as physical distancing in infrastructure construction project potentially hinder the project acceleration. In addition, this new health standard protocol should not become a new burden for a recipient country. In this regard, one example of an extra burden is setting a new obligation for recipient country to provide development partner with a report of safeguard policy on the COVID-19 in relation to the implementation of development cooperation project. Overall, we need to have a profound and comprehensive dialogue for setting up and harmonizing the new development strategies and policy. Thank you, Munina.
Thank you very much, Pak Leo. Now, allow me to start this talk show by asking all of the panelists, what are the perspectives of the development partners on the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on ongoing development cooperation, both at global and Indonesia levels today? All countries need the support from their development partners when meeting the emergency needs as well as economic recovery needs of communities impacted by the pandemic. We want to know your overall opinion on this topic. Could we start first from Korea? His Excellency Pak Kim Chang-byum, please Pak.
Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua, teman-teman semuanya. Thank you, Ibu Nina. Yes. Let me first of all express my deep gratitude to Bapak Suarzo, Bapak Menteri, and all the staff of Bappenas for inviting me at this important webinar on development cooperation in the era of new normal. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Bapak Menteri for providing me with quite a visionary speech at the beginning, and also to Bapak Leo for comprehensive and informative presentation on Indonesian government's policy directions and focuses in its national agenda in the so-called post-COVID-19 era. Today's topic is very relevant and also quite timely in view of unprecedented challenges arising out of the global pandemic. It is well-serving for all the development players and partners to fulfill urgent needs for actions for greater cooperation and solidarity in tackling this global crisis. And the COVID-19 crisis has the potential to radically change development cooperation at a global and national level. First, it shows how interconnected and interdependent our world has become. There is no way of tackling the COVID-19 crisis at national levels only. Helping you is helping me. International cooperation and multilateralism are more needed than ever. Second, COVID-19 illustrates our common vulnerabilities across borders, beyond north-south, east-west, public-private divides, and the limits of our segmented approach to development cooperation. A more holistic and coordinated approaches are needed than ever. Third, strategic intervention by the state becomes central again to address health, social, economic impacts of COVID-19. With a more economic contraction that would be foreseeable, public budgets will have to become more strategic, as was mentioned by Bapak Suarzo, more focused and more counter-cyclical, and leverage more private finance for development. The fourth, COVID-19 stimulus and recovery packages are badly in need. It provides a golden opportunity to engage in ambitious, sustainable transformation initiatives toward more sustainability, inclusivity, and equity. For example, in case of Korea, it adopts digital and Green New Deal for its economic stimulus packages. Let me turn to Korea's bilateral development partnership with Indonesia. The COVID-19 crisis is now serving as a new catalyst to strengthen up already existing special strategic partnership between Indonesia and Korea, especially in development cooperation. From the very outset, Korea has designated Indonesia as priority partner for emergency assistance in our joint fight against COVID-19. That illustrates changes for the better and even closer partnership with Indonesia in development cooperation with more emphasis on human security. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Kim, for your perspective. And now let's go to hear from His Excellency Pak Peter Schoof. What is the view from the government of Germany? Pak Peter?
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. And thank you very much to Pak Suarso for his inspiring opening statement, and to Pak Leo for his statement. And of course, I greet my colleague Ambassador Kim and Winfried Wicklein from the ADB, and Alistair. Hello, good morning. Thank you for organizing this panel. And I understand we are going to get a number of questions on different aspects of the development cooperation response to COVID. So let me, on this first question that is rather general, make a couple of more generic remarks. Our approach to development cooperation within COVID-19 and after COVID-19 is guided by three principles. The first principle is that our development cooperation has to be adaptive. We have to adapt to the new circumstances, to lockdowns and so on. I can give you a very practical example. You know that Germany is associated with very much with TVET, because this is where we are considered to have a lot of expertise, and we have a very broad range of activities in this field. When we saw that tourism more or less broke down in the course of the COVID crisis, we have started a program in Lombok where we have developed online teaching materials for apprentices with directed to new skills, so that they can use the time where basically there's no tourism taking place to use this time in additional learning, and also broadened skills. So that is a very practical example for the adaptation that we're trying to achieve. The second principle that guides our activities at the moment is that of a protection of our general sustainability policies. There is a concern in many quarters that after the recovery, when the recovery takes place, that we may run the risk of being very, how should I put it, GDP oriented only, and neglect a number of very important issues that we're working on together with Indonesia and at the global level, like climate policy and so on. So I think this is really a situation, COVID-19, where it will be shown whether we can shine or we can fail in this. And I think we can use the transformative momentum of this crisis also to really put more emphasis on these policies and thereby protecting this agenda. The third principle that is very important for us is that of a refocusing. I think that we are all individually and in our societies psychologically very much affected by what has happened here with the speed of light. A general breakdown of international logistics, of trade, of transport, what have you. And when we are honest, I mean, first of all, within COVID, we don't know how long this is going to last. Will there be a vaccine? When will it come? But also, maybe in the future, might there be other pandemics that of a similar nature that will come? So I think it is time to also refocus in development cooperation on the health sector at large, in particular with a view to a better preparedness in terms of logistics, in terms of also a number of other policy areas like trade. We have to ensure that we can build and maintain robust regional or global supply chains on medical equipment. We've seen what happened at the beginning of the crisis. So this is something where we can learn lessons and we can also empower our systems at the country level, at the region level, but also at the global level to make ourselves more immune against the similar situations. As concerns Indonesia in general, we have, I think, rather quickly put together a new response package, and I would like to really pay tribute to Winfried Wicklein and the Asian Development Bank, because we have been guided by them also very well. So what we have been doing is we are supporting the regional economic boost package that the ADB has developed with an amount of 300 million euros extra on top. We have contributed to the concessional funding for health infrastructure, the so-called CARE program of the ADB, with loans, preferential loans with 250 million euros, which came on top of our development cooperation. And might I say also, we are one of the countries who have topped up their contribution to WHO, because that is very important. And if I may make one last point, that is sort of an ad hoc initiative that we should all, concentrate on at this time. That is the international effort that is going on to make sure that vaccines, medicaments, lab materials can be distributed in a fair and equitable manner throughout the world, especially throughout the global south. There was a month ago this very important pledging conference organized by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, together with Chancellor Merkel and President Macron. This conference generated 7.4 billion euros together with other initiatives like Gavi, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, WHO, a number of development banks, the World Bank, so that we have a firepower. Once these goods are on the market, they are considered public goods. And we have a mechanism where we can purchase these goods in big quantities, so to make sure that the distribution is not only ruled by a very competitive spirit in the market, but that we are all guided by a sense of multilateralism, of fairness, and of generosity and solidarity in the world. So I leave it there for the moment and look forward to your other questions. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very much for the general view, and everybody listens to what you have said. Very valuable. And I'm now going to His Excellency, Pak Alastair Cox. What do you think about this, and what is Australian government perspective on this issue, Pak? Please, Pak Alastair. Pak Alastair is still mute. Can the organizer help? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Nina. Thank you for the opportunity to today, and thank you to Bapanas, to the Minister, and to Bapanas for hosting this this webinar today, and to my fellow panelists. I'll just make three quick points which reflect on the pandemic that we're confronting now. The first is, I think we need to recognise that it is really an unprecedentedly negative impact on global and regional national development. I think the World Bank has predicted that 60 million people globally will be pushed into extreme poverty as a result of this pandemic. And that's the first time that global development has gone backwards at such a rate since 1998. And similarly, the World Food Programme has estimated that 130 million extra people worldwide will be pushed into crisis levels of hunger by the end of 2020, which means on top of those who are already facing severe situation, almost 260 to 270 million people will be thrown into extreme hunger globally by the end of the year. So there's definitely not business as usual as a result of this pandemic. And I think that requires international agencies, the national governments and partners, all to work together to address this as an emergency crisis situation. And I think there are three priorities which are the key areas to work on. First, as other panelists have highlighted, health security is a critical priority now. And so working nationally and internationally on strengthening our collective and individual health security, our health security systems, our data systems, our health systems in country. The second, I think, is stabilisation, stabilising the economic and social situation, the social safety nets, social protection, and social systems, and finally looking both now and over the next 2 to 3 years at the economic recovery and building in place strong systems to face this difficult economic situation. And as Ambassador Peter said, looking at building our capacity. Now we've learnt from this pandemic about if there's another pandemic, and we're learning that, you know, pandemics can't be avoided. It's just because we've had one now doesn't mean we won't have another one for another 100 years. There could be another one in another 10 years. So I think all of those things have been reflected in Australia's new aid program, which is called Pathways to Recovery, Partnerships for Recovery. And this is a program that the government has just released last week, our new aid policy for the next 2 to 3 years. So it's an interim policy. The government has already reallocated within this financial year. Our financial year ends at the end of June. So within the envelope we had, we've already reallocated globally $280 million of our program for the remainder of this year. And then for the next 2 or 3 years, more than $4 billion program will be reorientated around these 3 priorities: health security, stabilization, social safety nets, and economic recovery. In the case of Indonesia, we've already reallocated, or what we call pivoted, around $44 million of our existing aid program to COVID-19 priorities. And perhaps later on I can outline a couple of areas where we've done that across programs covering social safety nets, economic recovery, economic development, health, disaster preparedness. But we've also just reallocated some money within our program, another $21 million to key needs in the system. So we've reallocated across Indonesian partner agencies, including Palang Merah Indonesia, including also reallocating to funds for UNICEF in Indonesia, for WHO in Indonesia, for their important work. So just in conclusion, this crisis is requiring a wholesale rethink, a step change in the way we're working, and now and in the next 2 to 3 years. So for us, it's a fundamental switch in what we're doing. A lot of it is many of the things we've already done, but we really need to target, focus on these key areas, some of which, well, most of which highlight very much the kind of priorities that Bapak Suharto also highlighted. So that's the footing on which we are going in this crisis. Thank you.
Pak Alastair, terima kasih banyak Bapak for always supporting Indonesia, and you've been outlining so many resources that will be allocated for Indonesia, and I think Pak Rio, we have to extend our terima kasih for Pak Alastair. Terima kasih banyak Pak Alastair. Now, Ibu Satu Kahkonen, please illuminate us with the perspective from the World Bank, Ibu, on this issue.
Thank you, Ibu Nina, and I'm delighted to be here this morning, and I want to thank Papenas for the invitation. And I also want to say selamat pagi to everybody who joins and all my fellow panelists. Now, going to your questions. So the World Bank is always leaning forward and stepping up support at the time of the crisis, and this crisis is no exception. Globally, the World Bank has already taken multiple steps in the past few months to provide support to the countries in need. Let me highlight 4 things. I mean, first of all, at the start of the crisis, the World Bank established a $14 billion global facility to address the immediate health challenge across the world. And under this facility, all countries were allocated funds to prepare health emergency operations. And so far, over 100 countries, including Indonesia, have tapped this facility. Second, we established another global emergency window to fast-track other support operations. And also our lending pipelines, we took a hard look and we started looking whether they are responding to the crisis. And Indonesia has benefited from both. Third, as we are speaking here, the World Bank is starting to release our crisis buffer, the World Bank crisis buffer. We always have put some money aside when if things are getting very tough. And now is the time to release the buffer so that we can support the countries in their economic recovery efforts, basically in the next phase of this pandemic. And fourth, for the poorest countries in the world, the World Bank and the IMF, jointly with the G20 finance ministers, have agreed on a temporary suspension of debt service payments until the end of 2020. Now, as this pandemic is evolving, the crisis is evolving, we are continually adjusting our approach, and we are also adjusting our support. Let me then say a few words about Indonesia, because we have also very quickly reacted to the crisis here. And in the case of Indonesia, as a short-term response, we have prepared 3 emergency operations amounting to about $1 billion to provide financing to support, first of all, health sector preparedness. Secondly, the expansion of social protection that is so critical at the time of the crisis like this. And thirdly, to support the government's overall fiscal and economic response to this crisis. In addition to that financial support, we have also restructured some of our operations so that ongoing operations so that they can support the crisis response. And we have also taken a very hard look of our lending pipeline for the coming year and adjusted, prioritized it in such a way that it addresses the economic recovery needs. We are also looking forward. So we, in fact, started thinking about economic recovery while we were preparing the short-term emergency preparations. And we have developed recommendations for the economic recovery phase that we have started discussing with the authorities, and we look forward to discussing those even further. And as partners of Indonesia, we will continue supporting this country through the crisis, both financially as well as through technical and analytical assistance. So we are here to help. Terima kasih.
Ibu Satu, thank you very much for outlining what the World Bank is going to help the government of Indonesia in addressing this pandemic. I'm very glad to hear that, and I think Pak Leo also very glad to hear what the World Bank has stated, as well as the other panelists, Pak Alastair, the position of the government of Australia and also Korea. Helping me is also helping you. I remember that vividly, what you just said. Now I'm going to go into Pak Winfried. What is the Asian Development Bank standpoint on this, Pak? Please, Pak Winfried.
Thank you, Ibu Nina, and thank you, Bapanas, for having me. Thank you, Bapak Menteri and Pak Leo for the opening remarks and the overview and the expectations, sharing the expectations of that you have of us, your development partners, fellow panelists, of course. But I also want to say I'm very impressed by the. I want to say hello to the many participants from all over the country that I saw have joined. And already sending comments through. Just to a couple of the previous speakers, my fellow panelists, they outlined a number of the really important principles that we are facing. For me, the tragedy really is that the crisis is affecting most those who were vulnerable even before the crisis. The poor, the ones who are just above the poverty line, the new emerging middle class, which has been pushed down again. That's a real strategy. We've worked with the authorities and done some impact assessments. It's at the moment it's early days still. We don't know how long the crisis will last, but there could be the poverty impact. Could be in the last 20 years, Indonesia made such remarkable progress in bringing the poverty, the number of poor people below the 10% to 1 digits, and we reckon that depending on the scenario, it could easily increase by 2 to 10 million people. We see unemployment numbers going up 1.5 million. The many underemployed Indonesians, they will be heavily impacted. So that is the real tragedy. We also know the crisis will be with us for quite a while. We don't know for how long, but we know for the next 1 year we will be in kind of upheaval stage until a vaccine and treatments have been are on the market. But even after that, it will take another couple of years until the economy stabilizes after a global economic crisis that will not go away overnight. So clearly, as previous panelists said, a pivot is expected from all of us, and the Asian Development Bank. We are based in the region. We're headquartered in the Philippines, in Manila. We have a big office here in Jakarta. It's one of our largest client countries, member countries in terms of operations here. We have pivoted or switched the switch, as Ambassador Alistair calls it. We switched immediately. We put together first on the health emergency. We worked with Ministry of Health and others on critical medical equipment, and then we worked with the Ministry of Finance and with many partners. Germany, a very significant partner. Also others, the AIIB partnered as well, and some others are still coming online with a very large, we call it a quick dispersing counter-cyclical program, really, that supports the government, bolster critical government spending in the health sector, but also in terms of supporting livelihoods and businesses and keeping businesses afloat to keep jobs going. And I wanted to say a big shout out. I really want to commend the Ministry of Finance, but also other economic ministries, the close cooperation between those economic ministries, finance, Bappenas, the economic coordination ministry, and the Bank Indonesia, which in a very closely coordinated manner have very swiftly reacted and acted on the crisis, and of course it helped that there was relatively strong macroeconomic and fiscal management in place. So before the crisis, so the crisis or the response could be well calibrated. Bottom line is, we are in the ADB, we are gearing up strongly for the crisis. Certainly, Indonesia and other countries in the regions are in need, and we are doubling in Indonesia our assistance this year from a regular $2 billion lending program to probably above beyond $4 billion, because this is, as previous speaker said, these are unprecedented times. Thank you.
Pak Wilfred, thank you so much for sharing what the ADB has been doing in helping the government of Indonesia. And I think Pak Leo can breathe, better. Now, thank you so much, Pak, for doubling the assistance for the government of Indonesia, as also the other panelists, the government of Germany, the government of Korea, and then the World Bank, and also Pak Alistair, the government of Australia. Thank you so much for sharing the view. Now I would like to go to Pak Leo. As the Deputy Minister for Development Funding, do you have any concrete ideas in terms of international financial and technical development cooperation, Pak? Pak Leo, the time is yours now.
Thank you, Ibu Dina. Regarding your question, I think all of us agree that the pandemic as well as the new normal are actually challenges for all of us to think and do out of the box. In this situation, we are also push to be more creative and innovative to develop delivery mechanism or schemes of development cooperation, in particular to address issues concerning people resilience and economic recovery. The creative and innovative delivery mechanism or schemes of development cooperation can be exemplified in the various forms, such as first, development of scheme to ensure the availability of nutritional intakes similar to the existing the so-called water grant scheme. Second, development and provision of financing facilities or schemes to Indonesia's pharmaceutical and medical device state-owned enterprise such as PT Bio Farma. The third one, provision of special grant or collaborative research schemes for our research institutes such as Ekman Molecular Biology Institute. The fourth one, provision of financing schemes to escalate the production of new COVID-19 related innovations such as the 57 innovation products launched by the Ministry of Research and Technology, National Research and Innovation Agency on May 20, 2020. Fifth, we also need to put financing for digital technology as our priority because, as my Minister Suharto said, digital technology will be the backbone of our future life. And the sixth, in short, we have to continuously develop innovative financing scheme, such as our integrated national financing framework that could be alternative source of financing to overcome the impacts of the pandemic. Therefore, discussion of our next development cooperation strategies should not be limited to adjustment of priority areas, but also on scheme and delivery mechanism to address our various immediate needs. Thank you, Budina.
Thank you, Pa. I think all of our development partners really listen to the examples of the potential cooperation, and it's very clear, and I can see that the alignment of the priority example given by Pa Leo with the priorities and focus of each of the development partners. I think it's a good start to redesign our development cooperation. Now, I'm going to ask, this is just the first question, I'm going to the second question. The second question to all of the panelists, is there a possibility for a change in policies, focus, strategy, and governance of development cooperation with the government of Indonesia in the new normal era, in short and medium term over the next 5 years? What mitigations are being taken to overcome the challenges and barriers in the transition period toward the new normal from the perspective of our development partners? Now I'm going to start from Pa Alastair. Pa Alastair, I would like to learn from you what is your view on this. So my question was, is there a possibility for a change back in policies, focus, strategy, and governance of development cooperation with the government of Indonesia in this new era? It's not in short term, but also in the medium term over the next 5 years, Pa Alastair. Pa Alastair, do you mind to start first to share with us? Please, Pa.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nina. As I said earlier, I think our view is that there needs to be a significant switch and change in the way we approach this. It is an emergency situation, and as our new aid policy shows, we can't just operate as if it's business as usual. So I think this will require us to work collectively with the Indonesian government, with Bappenas, with the development partners, the multilateral development banks, the bilateral partners. And I think we would welcome increased coordination to ensure that resources are properly allocated across the system. We already sense that within Indonesia there are many different agencies looking for assistance and resourcing. So I think it needs strengthened coordination, and I think we would definitely be looking for strengthened coordination. A number of us, I think, all have been working with the National COVID-19 Task Force led by BNPB and with Bappenas and with other agencies. But I think over the next months, we're going to be looking for increased coordination with you. So I think that is absolutely a critical part of it. Another important part, I think, is to, and consistent with the objectives of the Knowledge Sector Initiative, is to work with Indonesia, all of us, on to help improve data collection, data use, data dissemination. Because I think in assisting economies and societies to move out of the crisis, to transition over the next year or two, countries that have stronger data, that have more transparent data, more believable data, these are the countries that are going to be the first to, I think, emerge from the crisis. These are the ones that I think are going to be the ones that are able to benefit from bilateral or trilateral or multilateral, plurilateral travel bubbles and systems. Whereas if data is uncertain or data is unavailable or data is not trusted, then I think as a result of that, those countries, those societies are going to find it more difficult. So strengthening data and the dissemination of data, I think, is going to be absolutely critical to helping reintegrate the human supply chains and the economic systems and to re-strengthening the foreign investment and the global supply chain linkages. So there's a couple of points. I definitely think, though, there is a possible, that, as I said in my first response, change, the need for policy change, for rapid adaptation is absolutely critical. But I think you've got to have that data. You talked of mitigations in the new normal, and I think the new normal is going to be all about data management and data dissemination for rapid response to the crisis, to keep in balance between the need for infection and transmission of the virus control versus economic opening up. I mean, I think we can already see that countries like in the Republic of Korea, very strong testing, very good use of data allows the economy to begin opening up. But then if there's issues, you can then close down certain sectors, but you don't necessarily need to close down everything. You can close down perhaps just one part of a city or what, So data is critical as a mitigation as we move into this new normal phase. And this is not just in Indonesia, but this is globally. But I think this is where countries like Indonesia, it's vitally important to keep going, to build on the systems for data management and data use to help manage this balance between economic reopening and disease management and control. And I think that's going to be an issue we're going to see well until at least we have the vaccine, if we have a vaccine, and thereafterwards. So I'll leave it there. Others will have comments, but there's some perspectives from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Alistair. Terima kasih banyak, Pak Alistair. I think Pak Leo later on will also respond to that Bappenas is now already having the COVID-19 dashboard. And that's the responsibility of Bappenas to develop one data. Now that is so relevant to what Pak Alistair mentioned. The other thing is also we have Pak Leo here. I think strengthened international cooperation will be done, and coordination, as always, will be done by Bappenas. Now, thank you, Pak Alistair. Thank you very much for the view. I think they are all very valuable. And I think now can we go into Ibu Satu? What about the World Bank? Is there any changes in the policies, Ibu?
Thank you, Ibu.
Thank you.
We are in fact just starting the preparation of a new strategy for World Bank Group's engagement in Indonesia for the next 5 years. So this is an opportune time then to adjust our strategy in such a way that it responds to the crisis. And in every country, we do prepare a new strategy, engagement strategy, every 5 years. So this is not something that wasn't planned. And the strategy that we are going to develop is again going to support the implementation of government's medium-term development plan. So the priorities that the government is going to perceive to be now the urgent ones are also going to be then our priorities. Now, that said, I don't expect that there are going to be major changes in our engagement in Indonesia. We already have a very large, very broad and very deep program with you. But what is very clear that in the next couple of years, we are going to be focusing on supporting the economic recovery. Now, unfortunately, as the many other speakers already mentioned, the crisis has reversed some prior gains made prior to the crisis. And this is in particular where we see this in poverty reduction. Indeed, we have done the estimates, what's going to happen to that, and it's not a pretty picture. And the other area is revenue generation. We do see now tax revenue significantly dropping. And given that there are very significant public spending needs, this is a big concern. So something needs to be done on that front. At the same time, the crisis has already exposed some weaknesses and vulnerabilities. For example, in healthcare, in social protection, and what was also mentioned by one of the panelists earlier, in trade policies, in agricultural trade policies, and in all the other trade policies. And I think the crisis highlighted the trade policies related to medical equipment, which became a constraint. But this is a time, this is an opportunity to start address those constraints to trade that are not basically allowing Indonesia to reap all the gains possible. So those kinds of issues we are going to be looking at, and these are the issues that will need to be addressed moving forward, and these will require some additional efforts. But having said that, it's very clear also that the core challenges of Indonesia, those issues that we have been working on before the crisis, and the Honorable Ambassador of Germany mentioned earlier climate change. So that's one area, it has not disappeared. Education challenge has not disappeared. Decentralization challenge has not disappeared. So these are all areas that will still need to be worked on. And what it means to us on the World Bank side, it means that our existing investment portfolio and our areas of engagement, they will continue as is. So the emphasis is going to be on the crisis recovery, But we are not saying that what we have worked on so far is suddenly becoming irrelevant. No, I mean, some of these areas may be even more relevant now, and they provide opportunities to move them forward than before. Now, finally, what I do want to mention is that we are not anticipating any changes in World Bank policies proper and structures. So, and this should provide government some comfort because it provides predictability to you at the time, at these very, very uncertain times otherwise. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Satu. Thank you for not changing the policy for our development cooperation. And the focus of the World Bank stays, I think, as what we have been doing together. Pak Leo took note, now he's taking note seriously what Ibu Satu has mentioned. The importance for the World Bank to support the economic recovery, poverty reduction, without, of course, forgetting the issue of climate change, education, and then also trade. And I believe she was also saying about healthcare. Those are the areas that the World Bank will not change the policy. Thank you very much, Ibu Satu, for sharing the view. Now, I'm going to go into Pak Peter. Is there any adaptive changes, Pak, in the policies from your side? Pak Peter?
Thank you very much. Let me from the outset say, of course, that as the crisis evolves, of course, our programming also evolves. But if you allow me to make just a couple of remarks, I think a number of speakers have underlined the importance that it is an overall objective to make our partner countries, to make Indonesia, as well as us in Europe, we're not that different in that regard, to make ourselves more resilient against this new type of external shocks that we have just experienced. And I think both Ibu Satu and Pa Winfried have before outlined a little bit the what we have lost in development markers here in Indonesia through this crisis. So I think for me personally at this time, the big question is that obviously we need to maybe have a second look at the whole issue of social inclusion, of the poverty issue, because we see the figures are not pretty as we learned. We have, assuming that this is a rising path that we see in Indonesia, and the poverty issue will finally come to a solution by itself. Now, this I think has to be subject to a fresh look. I think the entire issue of absorptive shock absorption capacity in the social sector is very important, and that is why also we try to, in an initial contribution, support the program of the ADB in that regard, and we are very much looking into the social tissue of the Indonesian society and how the government is dealing with this. I believe that what I said before, you know, I mean, today there is a very interesting op-ed by Klaus Schwab, which is also printed out in the Jakarta Post. And basically the bottom line is we should come out of this crisis in a better world, with a better world that the world was before we went into this crisis. So we should also look at the crisis as a chance. And I mean, he also mentioned, of course, climate policy and so on. And you know, if you look at the psychological reaction of societies throughout the world, I mean, one thing is amazing is, and if I listen to podcasts of young activists, climate policy these days, they say, look, there's the world. It has an incredible adaptive capacity. And we were always told things are not possible, you know, and here the world comes to a standstill. Basically, there are so far no civil wars, with maybe a few exceptions, but anyway, so there is apparently the adaptive capacity of our countries, of societies, of the world, is maybe higher than we thought before, and this is an insight that we should also use. When it comes to Indonesia, particularly for us, it is also very important that in everything we do here, we look at Indonesia also in its role in ASEAN. its leadership role in ASEAN. And that is why Indonesia is one of our 6 global development partners around the world. So this role maybe even become for us more important, and for the European Union in general more important, because of the particular role in this Southeast Asian region. So we would like to also look into the possibilities to enhance our policy dialogues, not only sort of be on this donor-recipient logic, but also broaden our context to a broader policy dialogue on certain issues. And then also, of course, look within ASEAN to what extent many of the aspects that we are dealing with now are of a regional nature, and see whether we can do some empowerment, or we can help to empower ASEAN also to strengthen its response capacity. Finally, let me say I fully subscribe to what was said before by Alistair, I think, on coordination. I think it is very important, more than ever, especially in this crisis, that we work even closer together in trying to learn from each other and be guided. I mean, frankly speaking, I mean, okay, we have a substantial development program in Indonesia, but of course, I think as far as the basic analysis is concerned, at least as far as the embassy is concerned, we rely very much on you in the ADB here and on the World Bank here, because you provide an analytical basis for everything we are doing that, okay, our development bank can also do, but I think as many of our programs are sort of we are cooperating in many programs, so I think it's important that we're reading from the same sheet. And that is why I think coordination will become even more important in the future. I leave it at that for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Peter. We we took note. Excuse me, took note of what you just mentioned. Pak Leo is also taking notice seriously on the policy dialogue, and Indonesia as the leader in ASEAN, as well as, of course, once again, coordination of all development partners in responding to COVID-19 pandemic. And I assure you that Bapak Nasri will be the one to coordinate all of the development partners to working better with us. Now, I would like also to listen to Pak Winfried. Could you describe what ADB's policies? Is there any changes in the policies, Pak?
Thank you. Well, yes. I mean, we have amongst the many known unknowns that we are facing. We know that's a huge, devastating impact. We know the crisis will be with us. We just don't know exactly how long it will go. So we are planning, in all of us are planning in scenarios and in phases. So the immediate switch, as I also explained earlier, for us has been support, full focus on health security and on budget support to help the government, kind of work towards stabilization, but also very importantly now on analytical knowledge support in helping government think, and on our expertise in that would lie in the economic and fiscal and social and poverty analysis. What are the impacts of various bounce back strategies, economic recovery strategies? So we are working right now on cost benefit analysis of various COVID response strategies with the Ministry of Finance, for example. So there's a lot of that work going on, and I would like to make one point here, and other panelists very rightly, obviously, pointed out the need for close cooperation amongst ourselves, with the government or government within government, government with development partners amongst themselves, etc. But also the cooperation between countries in the region and globally. I think that's a very important point, because nobody has been through this kind of crisis. So we are all tapping a little bit in the dark. We are trying to get the data, and we're trying to analyze as good as we can, but there is no textbook that exists for Indonesia and other countries to look at. But some countries have, all countries have, in their own way, they have gathered a lot of experience in a very short time, and some better, some not so good. But from all of those, lessons can be drawn. So that's one of our focus areas at the moment. We are bringing together, just earlier when we were chatting before the session started, I was sharing with Ambassador Kim and thanking him for a session that we organized yesterday. ADB invited senior policymakers from the region, including from Indonesia, to listen to the lessons learned from Korea, from the Korean Ministry of Finance. We have next week, we have sessions between Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand on very senior, top level economic decision makers. So just to share what works, what doesn't work, under which circumstances, that is very important in the immediate term. So we spend a lot of time on this right now. But then we're also looking at the medium term. We are preparing a new country strategy. In fact, we were about to submit to our management, to the government, and to our board for approval a new country strategy for Indonesia. We obviously have held it back, and we have to COVIDize it, as we call it. We will have a very strong focus on 4 areas. Economic recovery from COVID, obviously, is one. Economic and fiscal policy planning will be a big part of it. Secondly, and then these are all areas that Leo pointed out earlier, the human capital development, the health security, the social protection, the education and skills that are required for the, not only for the recovery, but for the medium and, in fact, for the long term, for the economy to be competitive. Another area we will focus on is the acceleration of private and public investments, including also structural reforms, as well as an area that we will focus now more than ever is around resilience. Resilience to natural disasters, resilience to pandemics, and very importantly, the climate change, which maybe brings me to my last point that I think Satu very rightly pointed out, and others as well. There are opportunities now to build back better, as it were. There is no such thing as a good crisis shouldn't be wasted, as the saying goes. Structural reforms. Indonesia is aspiring to become from an emerging upper middle income level to a higher income level. That's from $4,000 roughly to $12,000 per capita GDP, GNI per annum. That's quite a long way. Indonesia is on its way, but never mind the setback right now through the COVID, which we're talking about a couple of few years, and then back on the trajectory. But the structural reforms, the competitiveness, productivity required to turn Indonesia into a modern economy that competes internationally. Those are areas that this is a good time now to focus on, as well as, and that's my last point, we should not forget, Ambassador Schoff mentioned the green recovery path as the climate change issues. We must not forget. We must not have quick wins without being smart about the quick wins. So we have to keep in mind the much more existential issues such as climate change. They're arguably more existential than COVID in the longer term. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapak, for all of the notes, the policies of ADB, and Pak Leo has taken note seriously. And I think what is really important is the cooperation among countries in the region. I think we need to start doing that. And the other thing is to stay taking care of the topic on climate change. The development should be green now, and that is really aligned with the Sustainable Development goals anyway. And I do hope that the country's strategy for the medium term that is now being discussed in Manila will be approved soon by the board, so that we could start working even closer with EDB. Now we have some remarks again from Pak Kim. Pak Kim, before you answer the question, I really have to mention to you, on behalf of the government of Indonesia, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude, Pak, to the government of Korea for providing early assistance during this pandemic situation. Now, please accept our sincere gratitude and thanks to the government of Korea. Would you like to answer the question, Pak?
Sure, yes. Thank you, Ibu Nina. Thank you, Ibu Nina. And well, that's kembali because Indonesia dan Korea adalah teman sejati dan sehati. So I think this is quite natural for us to extend our very best assistance to our Indonesian friends. About the question, my answer is yes, there are changes in focuses and priorities, and more changes to follow in the coming future. Korea will further gear up its level of development cooperation with Indonesia, especially in Indonesia's responses to COVID-19 pandemic during and after this crisis. Korea's focus will be on people. It is in line with Korea's new Southern policy, which is a policy initiative to deepen and expand partnership with ASEAN 10 member states, but including Indonesia in particular, to achieve so-called people-oriented prosperity. Korea's primary aid agency, Korea International Cooperation Agency, which is called KOICA, is now setting out a new agenda reflecting the challenges and needs coming from this coronavirus pandemic. It is called Agenda for Building Resilience Against COVID-19 through Development Cooperation. It is a very new one. It is to save lives and to promote safe livelihoods. It will be based on sharing with partners Korea's experience and technology-based expertise, and also resources to build capacity in preparation for the post-COVID-19 era. It is divided into two stages. The first stage is response. The second stage is resilience. It is more in line with what Bapak Suarzo, Bapak Menteri, and Pak Leo has illustrated in his national agenda. It will be applicable to our partnership with Indonesia as well. First of all, the Korean government is putting greater emphasis on helping Indonesia's ongoing responses to combat this pandemic by assisting its medical and quarantine capabilities. Against this backdrop, let me share with you some of the Korea's previous assistance. Korea provided $500,000 worth of PCR test kits and disinfectant sprayers for BNPB at the very beginning in April. In addition to that, Korea is setting up inclusive, responsive program on COVID-19 exclusively for Indonesia with a total amount of $5 million. The program is for an emergency and early response. It consists of several components, mainly supply of emergency items, medical equipment, support for ongoing projects, and civil society in collaboration with PMI and NGOs. The program will be hopefully expected to be implemented within the second half of 2020 this year. KOICA, the aid agency, is ready to start an initial discussion with Bapenas and BNPB on this emergency support program very soon. Paleo, hopefully that I would like to seek Bapenas' support and coordination in expediting its consultation process with concerned ministries and agencies. And from a more medium-term perspective, Korea is planning to work together with Indonesian government in augmenting its resilience capacity in public health system. The Korean government is willing and prepared to provide Economic Development Cooperation Fund is a kind of soft loan for Indonesia. The fund can be used for supply of necessary medical and health system, which will be need for Indonesia to conduct public health system reformation and beef up health infrastructure building. I would like to ask once again Bapenas to coordinate with concerned ministry, especially with the Ministry of Health, to speedily work out this program. I will stop here and then thank you so much. Terima kasih.
Pak Kim, terima kasih banyak Pak. Terima kasih for, of course, helping the government of Indonesia at the very early stage of this pandemic. The provision of PCR and the test kit, and also the coming assistance for the medium-term perspective to help building or improving the resilience capacity in our health system. And I think it's completely in line with what our minister said at the beginning. And thank you very much for that, Pak. And I believe Pak Leo will coordinate this collaboration with the Ministry of Health to start the program together. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are so glad that we still have more than 1,300 participants in this webinar. So the distinguished panelists, our webinar is watched by more than 1,300 participants from a number of countries. And we have also around 60 questions, since now we are approaching almost 12 o'clock. I'm sorry that I will have to only pick one. Pick one that is that can be addressed to all of the panelists. The question is not only to the World Bank and ADB. We would like also to get the views from the Australian government that is represented by Ambassador Alistair Cox, and also Pak Kim, the Ambassador of Korea, and of course Pak Winfried, and also Pak Ibu Satu. Pak Peter, you can also jump into the question. Now, the question is coming from Hans Atloff. He said that millions of Indonesian vulnerable households are pushed back into poverty since there were no buffer available. Where does the development partners see opportunities for the new normal to be more equitable? Can, or for instance, development funding become more flexible to build buffer of idleness into social protection system to soften external shock such as COVID-19? And I would like to address to Pak Winfried. Pak Winfried, can you start sharing your view on this question?
Yeah, no, sure. I think this is really this is a key question. When we spoke earlier about depending on the scenario, the 2 to 10 million Indonesians which will be pushed into poverty, but that number does not include those who will be, the upcoming middle class, lower middle class, emerging middle class, that will be pushed down closer to maybe just above the poverty line, which is not included in those already large numbers. So it's a huge problem, and a lot of the tremendous gains that Indonesia had made until now will probably be undone, at least for a while. And I'm afraid it's also not going to, after a year when maybe a vaccine is available, I don't think that will the increase in poverty will immediately go away. So there is a lot of thinking has to go into how to address it, but also how to take opportunities. And we spoke earlier about this, how to turn the crisis into an opportunity to create a more equitable development. So a number of measures that come to mind. Number one is the immediate jumps immediately to mind, of course, the social protection systems. Indonesia has a very a good and quite developed system of condition of cash and non-cash conditional transfers, and that can be further strengthened and is being further strengthened. The World Bank is supporting that, Satu, and ADB is supporting this now as well, and more so in future. It's one area. The other area is particularly for the young people, the education and skills, especially now skills, those who are pushed out of jobs, keep them skilled at the skill level, that they don't de-skill, and also young graduates try to get the skill level up. And in fact, keep in mind already what we talked until only 3 months ago, when we talked about the skill levels needed for the new economy, for technology, the age of technology, etc. So there's don't stop in skilling towards that end. The other larger area, of course, is infrastructure. The infrastructure stock in Indonesia is still very underdeveloped. In fact, it has never really recovered from the Asian financial crisis. So access to schools, to hospitals, to markets has been a problem. Electrification in rural areas has been issues. So infrastructure is another large area. And then, of course, talking about new technologies, the financial market access to finance will be very important, increasingly important, and for a recovery strategy to enable people to get small micro loans, particularly in formal sector, but also small and medium enterprises as well. Last point I'd make is the climate change. If you just keep climate change is not only for it's important for the green growth path, but it also it's an employment generator. So that's another incentive for thinking green. Thank you.
Thank you, Pa Winfried, for the elaborative answers of ADB, what ADB is going to do. I took note around five things that ADB would like to work with the government of Indonesia, and I will again underline the climate change that will have to be focused, aside from, of course, the social protection system, and then the skills for the youngs, the youth force, and then the infrastructure, as well as access to finance to respond to this pandemic era. Now, Pak Peter, I am really sorry that you will have to leave soon, shortly, right? Due to other agenda. And would you mind answering the question as well as provide your closing remarks, Pak? Because I will ask each of the panelists very short closing remark at the end. Since you will have to go, would you like to answer the question as well as providing us with the closing remark? Please, Pak Peter.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm very sorry that I have another 10 minutes, but then I will have to leave. But thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to make some comments on this question, on which certainly we are not. I mean, I think Winfried and Ibu Sato are much better placed to comment on that. But I think, on a general note, I think it is important. We have been observing and monitoring, of course, with a lot of attention, the measures that the government undertook to strengthen social policies. And of course, I think with you and other ministries, we are interested to see and to analyze to what extent these policies are well targeted, to what extent these policies also are addressing the issue of transformation. Because as I mentioned in my opening statement with this little example from Lombok, I mean, one intelligent way is, of course, for people to lose their job to engage on schemes of skills training, which might be useful and create an added opportunity for those concerned. But I think in general, it's probably for everybody who looks at as an expert at these issues, a very interesting example to see how we can make the social tissue of the societies more resilient and to find which policies correspond best to this objective. And I think, again, a lot has to do also with our dialogue and to see how other countries are coping and dealing with this. And it's an interesting policy dialogue. As you said, and as I have to leave soon, there are 2 or 3 points that I wanted to make more of a general nature. And that is, again, to point to the very important external policies dimension of the current crisis. I mean, everybody, of course, is struggling in his own garden to manage this crisis. But of course, we are confronted, of course, if you look at the big narratives with quite substantial questions. I mean, there is this narrative of the so-called strategic autonomy, which is on the surface a very understandable reaction to what we see, to reshore and to make sure that we redirect investment and production of manufacturing in certain areas back home. On the other hand, I mean, in our view, in the German view, this cannot be the solution, but the solution must be to find an intelligent balance of a multilateral system with strong and active and resilient partners who are, of course, able to create synergies from international trade. And this is why it's so important, I think, that these initiatives, like the one that Ibu Retno undertakes with 8 or 10 foreign ministers, this ministerial coordination group on COVID, which just analyzes the supply chains in health materials, to see where can we sort of generate gains and create synergies and support each other mutually. I think this will be very important that we end up in a trade world which is not just marked just by a strategic autonomy-minded mindset of nations who all try to look at themselves and to ignore the big opportunities, of course, that international trade presents. So that is a very important thing. The second thing that I would like to say is I was yesterday participating in an interesting webinar organized by LIPI. And I believe it is a very good opportunity for Indonesia to, and for us as development partners, to include maybe in a more broader way the entire field of research and innovation into our policies. I mean, there are so many universities where vaccines are tested, where medications are tested. There's a considerable effort here in this country to mobilize the pharmaceutical expertise in this country to be part of this. And I mean, I think Alistair mentioned before this whole issue of the database that is important for intelligent policy decisions. And I think there is a lot of best practices now around which, I mean, Ambassador Kim, the Korean example, I mean, we in Europe, I mean, it's a mixed picture, but I think in Germany still it's also not so bad. So how can you actually generate a good database for your policy decisions and also as a basis to communicate to your societies? And the very last point I would like to make, if I may, which is a political point. I think for my country, it is very important that we organize ourselves in our countries and in the European Union and in other parts of the world in a way which demonstrates that open societies and democracies are actually as able to cope with this kind of challenges as authoritarian systems. It is possible to maintain fundamental rights, to limit the interventions of government to a reasonable and proportionate extent. And this is the principles which guide us in our response. We all know that this is an extraordinary situation which is requiring extraordinary measures and interventions which are affecting the privacy, the personal life of citizens in a strong way. But I think still, if I look at the debate in Europe, I mean, this is what it's all about, is how to find an intelligent balance, and also to demonstrate that that the management of such monumental challenges is not only something for very resilient authoritarian marked systems, but it's also our societies like Indonesia, democracies like Indonesia and our country and Korea and Australia that are able to address these issues. So with this, I would like to thank everybody. Thank you for having me in this webinar, and I wish you good continuation. And I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Peter. We really appreciate your response to the question from the audience, as well as your closing remarks. For sure, Pak Leo has been taking a lot of notes from all of the panelists. Now, I'm going to ask Pak Alastair on the question from the audience. Pak, what is your view about the question from the audience, Pak Alastair? Pak Alastair, please, Pak.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nina. And to the question, I can see there are 73 questions there. So thank you to all the participants for the active participation to that question. I mean, I think the question goes to this fundamental issue about inequality. And I think, we know that Indonesia has been grappling with the problem of inequality now. We know the Gini coefficient, certainly since the resources boom, the Gini coefficient was showing there were real issues with inequality. And I think Indonesia has been doing a lot to try to build up its social protection system. And we've been working with our Makota program with TNP Duaka on systems to try to improve, as Winifred said, the systems of cash and non-cash transfers. And so I think it's vitally critical, and to pick up on what Satu also said, not to lose track of, as we're focusing on the immediate COVID priorities, not to lose track of all of the important programs that we've been working on before. And a lot of it comes down to governance, strengthening the governance, strengthening the system of building up the national and decentralized system of governance that Indonesia has been building to bring social services, social assistance closer to the people at the kabupaten level, at the city level, listening to local, building up the capacity of local government agencies to deliver better social services, coordinated at the provincial and then national level. So all of those things that we've all been working in collaboration with Indonesia now for the 20 years of Reformasi, we mustn't lose track of any of that good work. A lot of progress has been made. And I think, just as the Ambassador Peter said, I mean, Indonesia as a strong democracy, you've been making steady progress. So all of that progress needs to be continued. COVID is as I said, it's really a major challenge, a difficult challenge, but that doesn't mean all of the good things that we've learned need to be thrown out and start again. It needs to double down, in effect, on all the things that we've been doing collectively in Indonesia to try to reduce inequality, to improve the governance, to deliver better services more effectively locally to the people, with better data, with better systems that link everything from the village up to the to the kabupaten, to the province, to the national. And so I think that work on governance with better data, allowing local authorities to better deliver services, including social assistance, that's the key to it. So I mean, I think in a way COVID just is like a major test of the system that's already been developing in Indonesia. And I think with improving that, I mean, this is what we found, for example, with the problem of stunting. You know, Indonesia was already making progress to try to bring those stunting levels, which had gone up since the end of the new order. But then from 2013, we saw stunting beginning to go down again, from around 37% down to 30% last year. And I think the risk is, of course, now that stunting may go backwards. But we need to ensure that the lessons learned about better coordination of government, better data, better work at the local level, delivering services to people based on information and coordination. All of those lessons are absolutely critical to ensuring that inequality doesn't go back, well, it may go backwards a bit, but not go backwards too far, and that we can use the governance gains that Indonesia has made to ensure that this problem doesn't take us too far backwards, and all the good things that have been done help to take us forward. So yeah, I think it all comes down to that governance and data and delivering services that people need at the local level based on what they are articulating they need through their local leaders, and that leaders are coordinating and working together. I think, to go to what Peter said before, that's the key. It's not about authoritarian system versus non-authoritarian. It's about coordination. It's about working together. It's about listening to the demands of the people and responding flexibly to that. And systems of governance, be they from democracies like, Korea or Australia, New Zealand, or Germany, through to other non-democratic systems like China. It's not about authoritarian versus not authoritarian. It's about the quality of the governance and the responsiveness to local demands and systems of data, and the strength of the governance system. It's not about the system of it's not about democracy versus non-democracy, I don't think. Anyway, there's some comments from me. Thanks.
Alastair, thank you so much for answering the question. Indeed, the question was addressing inequality, and I'm glad that you were bringing better data for us to tackle our problems now, and of course to work better with the local government in ensuring social services is delivered and well targeted and timely. And of course, the other thing is the international collaboration. And this is why we have this webinar actually, to consolidate the international cooperation with the government of Indonesia that Bappenas is initiated and supported by KSI. And I would like to, that question, I would like Ibu Satu to respond to that, Ibu. Please, Ibu Satu. What is the World Bank panelist? She's the only lady in the panelist. Together with me as the moderator.
Yes, Ibu Nina. I realized we are the only ladies in this panel.
Yes, indeed.
It's the quality of ladies. So okay. Sorry, I couldn't resist to say that. No, but the question that was posed, it's actually a excellent question. And because we on the World Bank side, we have also stepped up the monitoring of poverty, monitoring of macro, monitoring of a lot of things during the crisis. And according to our estimates, as a result of this crisis, up to 10 million additional people may fall into poverty in Indonesia. So it's a significant challenge that the country is going to face when it gets to the recovery phase. So what can be done? I mean, we all know that it's the growth, economic growth is the solution because it typically lifts the boats. But it only lifts the boats, all boats, if the growth is inclusive. So basically, what we will need to do as we move forward, we need to find ways to promote inclusive growth. So then the question is, what are the tools to do that? And then we are getting to the human development side, because then the key issues, and because I don't want to talk about the very big growth challenge, because it's a vast pocket to discuss. But what we can do to make sure that the growth is inclusive and people are benefiting from that, and we can, first of all, the social protection is a key. On the World Bank side, we have been working very closely with the government to strengthen and expand the social protection system. And in fact, only about a month ago, we took another operation, support operation for social protection to our executive board, and we are now implementing that. But it's very clear that this crisis has highlighted that there's still much more that needs to be done. That the delivery mechanisms of social assistance, they need to be strengthened. And this is an area where we are going to look into. And then also, is there a need to expand further? And this is another issue that we are going to be working on. So the social protection is very much a priority for us. You know, how are we going to provide these transfers to the people in need? But in the area of social protection and labor policy, there's another very important area that there's an opportunity to address that now. And that's the unemployment insurance. Unfortunately, Indonesia doesn't have an unemployment insurance system today. And I think this crisis has highlighted that putting such a system in place is now a big priority, because that would immediately provide protection to those people who are losing their jobs. Now they have already lost their jobs, and they are falling into the poverty because of that. So that to us is something that's very important, and it's urgent to turn the attention to that. And we are keenly aware that the Omnibus Bill is also covering that, and we are happy about that. But then the other two areas, education. To provide equal opportunities, people will need to have equal access to quality education. And I'm very pleased when I see the Honorable Pa Nadiam, the Minister Nadiam, what he is trying to implement on the education side, because those reforms are very much needed so that everybody in Indonesia will have the tools and the skills to enter the labor market, and will have also then access and opportunity to compete for good jobs. And last but not least, health. Again, I mean, this crisis has exposed weaknesses in the healthcare delivery system in Indonesia. And it's in particular the people who do not have the opportunity to go elsewhere for care that are then being hit by any weaknesses in the system. And therefore, it's important that we are learning the lessons from this crisis, and we are now starting to strengthen the healthcare delivery in Indonesia even more. And this is very much, I mean, in all of these areas, the World Bank is already working on with the government, and we are ready to step up our support to make this system work. Let me say one final thing, because yes, it's important to basically provide these services and opportunities to the people, but unless there is an equal opportunity then also to enter into business, to do trade, to invest, it's only then it's not going to work. And therefore, basically, this is a good opportunity to start basically, and I know the government has already started doing that, but to look at the ways, how are we going to improve and lighten the business environment so that it provides an equal opportunity for all, so that there's a level playing field for everybody who would like to get into the business, who would like to trade, who have innovative ideas, to basically implement their ideas and to fulfill their dreams in Indonesia. So there are today restrictions, quite heavy restrictions, and this is basically an obvious time to start looking at dismantling any restrictions to trade, any restrictions to investment, because Indonesia will be better off the more investment, domestic investment, foreign investment, it can attract to the country. Let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Satu. There are all important issues that have been raised. Pak Leo, I know he has been taking all the notes stated by our honorable panelists, and the World Bank at least has 6 things that Ibu Satu mentioned. I will quote the last one: the equal opportunity to entering business and trade. I think this is really important. And the other thing, besides productive, inclusive growth that goes into human development, social protection, education, health system, and then to start thinking you were saying about the unemployment insurance. I think this will have to be also considered by Pak Leo, aside from what other issues there are important. Finally, I will ask Pak Kim. I know that you are going to leave. Now my watch tells me that it's already 12, but please, Pak Kim, can you answer the question for us?
Yep. Thank you, Ibu Rina.
Terima kasih, Pak.
Thank you so much for all the insightful comments. And as for the question from the audience, I do echo what previous speakers have mentioned and explained. One saying in Bahasa Indonesia is always resonating in my heart when we were discussing this whole issues. Ringan sama dijinjing, berat sama dipikul. I think that in times of crisis, we should shoulder the burdens together. We should do heavy lifting together. I think that is quite a spirit that we all here feeling in the midst of this whole discussions. And in addition to what our previous speakers have very eloquently pointed out, I just want to highlight 2 important points that might be relevant and also quite prerequisite for the purpose of reflecting the needs to address social and economic inequalities and how to improve inclusiveness on the ground. One is good governance, as was pointed out by other previous speakers. Good governance on the ground is essential and crucial to elevate the level of effectiveness on the ground, to reach out to the furthest behind who are really in need. And another point is the harmonization or even synchronization of all the stakeholders' activities amongst central government, local governments, and civic society and business community to be in the whole of government approach, in a sense. We often read some of the news report that there are some incoordination, lack of synchronized moves on the ground, on the field. I think that's something that is speedily and easily improved in order to provide necessary assistance and relief for those who are really in need as far as this social protection and social safety net are concerned. And in conclusion, I'd like to thank you for having me in this wonderful lineup of speakers. And also thank you, Bapak Menteri, Bapak Suarzo, and also Pak Leo, and all the staff of Bapenas for organizing this meaningful webinar. One small suggestion, maybe I would like to pose to Pak Leo and the Bapenas, because in order to be more efficient and effective in delivering our resources out to our people and friends in Indonesia, I think there's we may be a bit flexible and adapting ourselves to new environment because we do understand that there's a current process in channeling development partners' resources into real actions, such as Blue Book and Green Book filings, is quite effective in peacetime. I mean, that peacetime means during this kind of conventional, ordinary circumstances. But the COVID-19 crisis is demanding us to act swiftly and to act differently. Taking into account this unprecedented scale of challenges and urgency of our actions on the ground, I strongly feel that current process should be more flexible enough to accommodate priority changes and refocusing and reallocation of resources and readjustment of programs so that we could hopefully to cope with newly emerging needs in a more effective way. Thank you once again, and I hope to see you soon. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Kim. Thank you very much for delivering your closing remarks as well. I know that you have to leave. We still have one more issue, that is the closing remarks actually. Thank you, Pak Kim, for joining. Thank you, Pak Kim, for joining this webinar. Thank you so much. Now it's already more than 12. It's already 12:10. We must wrap up because of we've been undergoing this discussion since 10 o'clock. This is my last question to Pak Winfried, Ibu Satu, and Pak Alastair to provide your closing remarks. As the Minister stated in his opening speech, to respond to COVID-19, Indonesia has been refocusing the development plan for 2020-21 to certainly address the issues of economic recovery and social reforms. The four main areas of development focus that will be addressed next year is one, recovery of industry, tourism, and investment. Two, national health system reform. Three, social system reform. Four, disaster resilience system reform. And these main areas are important part of sustainable development that will be safeguarded from the planning stage. It's a must that we have to safeguard this from the planning stage. And now, would you? This is. I'm sorry to ask this to you. Would you collaborate with the government of Indonesia, in particular, Bapenas, to assist designing and planning the recovery and the reforms based on your expertise and practices? Ibu Satu is the World Bank policy addressing this already. I heard here and there that collaboration of all of the stakeholders need to be strengthened and coordinated. Now, Bapenas would like you to get the view. Pak Leo is listening to you now. Please.
Okay. Thank you, Ibu Nina. And my short answer to your question is absolutely. The World Bank is ready to work with Bapenas on all of these areas. I mean, as you know, we are already working on these areas, but we are committed to ensure that the economic recovery of Indonesia goes hand in hand with the fight against the virus. And I think the Prime Minister, the Honorable Minister, the areas that he mentioned, they are really critical. But let me mention also a couple of other issues, because this crisis has clearly heightened the importance and urgency to proceed with many reforms to ensure the well-being of citizens. And let me give you a few examples. So on top of what you already listed, I mean, there is a need to increase tax collection and improve the quality of public spending. And that's now necessary because the tax revenues are declining, have declined, public debt is increasing, and there is an increased need for public spending because of the crisis. What this then also means that there is a need to mobilize private sector to fill the infrastructure gap, given that the public resources are limited. So this is now even more important than before. But to do that, it then requires that the constraints and restrictions to investment as well to trade are tackled. So in order to get the private sector to step in and in order to invest in volume to infrastructure, this is one big issue that would need to be addressed as a matter of priority. And it also, this crisis has highlighted the need to deepen the financial markets and try to develop further the capital markets. I mean, we already talked a lot about health, social protection, yes, disaster risk management. We are very much working on that. Those are very big priorities. And given that basically this pandemic, it's no more a sprint. We initially thought that this would be a sprint, and we are now coming to an end with the sprint, but now the finish line of this race is nowhere close. And we have now entered into a marathon. And it's important that we are then continuing these efforts to strengthen health, social protection, education, all of those areas that were mentioned. But if I may, I mean, in us closing, I would like to say a few words about the crisis and the opportunities that crises create. Crises are doom and gloom. There's no question about that. But crises are also opportunities for change. And therefore, they are also opportunities to shine. They are opportunities for countries as well to shine. And as Indonesia is shifting from this sprint to address COVID, to the marathon, and as it starts basically charting the economic recovery path, it's important basically realize that this is a good opportunity to accelerate the structural changes that are needed to attract the investment, to accelerate the economic recovery, and put the country back on the growth path. I mean, it's a big challenge, but I'm sure Indonesia is basically able to take advantage of that. Indonesia is a priority partner for the World Bank, and that is not going to change. We have a long-standing and productive partnership with Indonesia that we cherish and we value. And we remain committed to working with Bapenas. We remain committed to working with government to help address these challenges that that all of you on the government side are now facing. And we are also ready to help you to grab the opportunities that this crisis is providing. So in short, I want to finish by saying that the World Bank stands ready to help you. And we look forward to continuing working with you, Ibu Nina. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih banyak Ibu Satu. Terima kasih banyak for putting Bappenas as your priority partner and to, of course, working with the government of Indonesia in addressing this challenging period. And I think you are correctly right by saying that crisis always bring opportunity. And that is what we also learned in 1998. Multiple dimensional crisis brings a lot of reform that we don't even realize it anymore now. But it was, I was one of the official in Bappenas who worked nights and days without, having a rest to ensure that social safety net is in place. So it was introduced during the crisis in 1998. Now we have the social protection, we have PKH and everything that started in 1998. And you are really right, Ibu Satu. We do hope that this crisis will bring the world, it's not only Indonesia, to having a better life by working together, not only with Indonesia but also Indonesia with other development partners. And you are very important for Indonesia. Development partners is really important for Indonesia to help us addressing this difficult, if I may say that, difficult situation. Now I'm going to go to ADB. Winfried, could you say your closing remarks, Pa?
Thank you, Ibu Nina. And no, sure, we are everything that ADB does is of course in support to the government and to Bappenas. We are in touch with Paleo's team on a weekly, if not daily basis. Indonesia is ADB's sixth largest shareholder. It's our third or fourth largest recipient of assistance, both finance and knowledge. So we are really in for the long term, and look forward to working with you in the areas outlined by parliamentary. We spoke a lot about the short term, the immediate corona response. We spoke about the medium term challenges that Indonesia is facing, along the lines that Satu very rightly outlined, from human capital development through to investment, resilience, domestic resource mobilization, financial markets, etc. I very much also support the view that we have an opportunity to build back better, to address some of the fundamental underlying issues that when addressed in a smart way, in the right way, could unleash really a growth path that will propel Indonesia into the higher level, the higher income level in the medium to longer term. And so in that sense, my parting word, as it were, would be that we should not miss the opportunity, the golden opportunity. No such thing as a good crisis that should not be missed to build a stronger, more sustainable, more equitable Indonesia when we come out of this crisis, on the other side of the crisis. Count on the ADB, and thank you very much for the opportunity, Ibu Nina, Bappenas, Paleo, and fellow panelists. Stay safe, keep up. Thank you.
Pak Winfried, thank you so much for your closing remarks. And I think Pak Leo is very happy to hear that ADB is still here helping us together with the World Bank and the Australian government and government of Korea, as well as the government of federal government of Germany. Now, Pak Alastair, last but not least, what are the approaches and strategies from the Australian government to ensure that development cooperation with the government of Indonesia can still be effective during this pandemic? Silahkan, Pak Alastair.
Thank you for that opportunity to make some closing remarks. I'd like to strongly endorse what both Ibu Satu and Pak Vini said earlier. In particular, the path out of this crisis is very much about restoring the foundations of economic growth, because it's economic growth, then well distributed, which will produce the jobs and reduce the poverty, and will increase the potential for everybody to move ahead as we were before. So economic growth is critical, and that goes beyond just government sector, as also Satu said. You can't rely on just flows of government assistance or multilateral flows from public organizations. The private sector is critical. So renewing the foundations for private sector investment, for private sector activity is absolutely critical. And I agree that that requires very policies to provide more certainty for the private sector to invest, and a more clear level playing field. So a lot of the work the government was already doing under the omnibus legislation, those reforms, that remains critical. But the crisis, as I said before, has highlighted now the new health dimension on certainty. So data, credible, transparent data about what's going on in an economy, to give confidence to private sector investors about the circumstances, both domestic investors and international investors, is critical. And because once you've got the investment coming in and the economic activity going on, you'll then get the growth for the taxation, so you can afford more measures. So you create the kind of virtuous cycle that Ibu Satu was averring to. And also in that context, the international collaboration is critical. I think, as Peter was saying before, this notion of some kind of strategic autonomy, whereby I suppose that means more countries doing more things themselves, that is not the right direction at all. So much of what was being achieved through globalization was a positive for humanity in terms of realizing better comparative advantages of trade and investment and human interaction. So we need to be careful that not to throw out the baby with the bathwater, the baby of international collaboration, much more efficient, effective allocation of global resources through trade and open exchange and human movement. So we need to, make sure that those are not lost. I mean, Indonesia, for centuries, long before the colonial era, was the point of exchange. Java was the point of exchange between, the great civilizations of China and India, and it was a meeting place, in the where everybody gained through international exchange, trading spices from the Spice Islands through to porcelains from China, and then, you know, to Europe. There were, you know, other, you know, products coming from Europe, and that was all happening in Java. So Indonesia for centuries, since the Majapahit era and before, was always a center of exchange. So I think Indonesia needs to champion, you know, the prosperity that comes from international exchange, and we need to make sure that this crisis doesn't see us falling backwards in terms of that. And all of the gains we've made are not lost because some politicians think it's better to have much more strategic, we can do it all ourselves in some sort of self-sufficiency pathway. You know, there are some countries in the world that are cut off from the world, and we can see what the situation is like in those countries, and it's not like what we have. So I think they're my key messages are the importance of governance, good systems, keeping going with what's been already achieved in Indonesia in terms of improving coordination of governance, making things more transparent, step by step, removing red tape, better systems, creating more certainty for investment, the government enabling that. I think the crisis highlights the importance, yes, of further improving health systems, but it also improved the importance of open, transparent data to provide certainty, and then the international collaboration piece, keeping markets and exchange open, because we know, not just in the last, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, but for centuries, that open market certainty and good governance and stability and open exchange, those are the foundations of prosperity from ancient kingdoms, you know, in the 13th century to modern 21st century. That's all the history. You look at Indonesia's history, look at the history, global history for, you know, 10 centuries. That's the way, that's what produces prosperity for people, and prosperity, growth, well managed with good governance, reduces inequality. They're the key lessons. So I'd like to thank everybody for participating, all the panelists. I'd like to thank Bapanas and Menteri Suharto for opening, and to Pat Leo and you, Ibu Nino, for your excellent moderation, and to Knowledge Sector Initiative for supporting this program today, with hosted by Bapanas. And thank you very much to everybody who's participated. So tetap selamat, tetap sehat semuanya, dan terima kasih. Mudah-mudahan ada kesempatan bertemu secara langsung tak lama lagi. Thank you.
Terima kasih banyak, Pak Alastair. There are so many things that you have underlined. Governance has to be put in place. Good governance, really good governance. And then you also talk about what have been put in place, and they are all good. It's to be continued. And what is also important is, aside from health system strengthening or reform, open data. Open data, Pak Leo, I think all of the panelists mentioned about the importance of data, and this is completely in line with the Minister of National Development Planning is doing now. He's coordinating the Satu Data, and the dashboard of COVID-19 is now with Bapanas as part of the Satu Data. And I need to report to you as well, Pak Alastair, that the data of SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goal data, will be part of the Satu Data. Why? Because we have the metadata already in place. So there will be no more question about indicators, because we agree on the metadata that is already been guided by the UN. Now, thank you so much, Pa Alistair. We really appreciate your very thoughtful views, taking into consideration the history from Majapahit until now. I think it's very important for us to learn back what we have done in the past, and crisis does not sense falling backward. This is, I think, very strong message from Pak Alistair, aside from the importance of the international cooperation for sure. Now, it's always nice to having this kind of discussion, and we seems to forget that now it's already almost 12:30. I would like to invite Pak Leo, after listening to all of the panelists. Would you like to convey your closing statement, Pak, before I officially close this important session? And for your information, until now, there are still almost 1,000 participants in this webinar. And Pak Alistair, thank you very much for KSI to helping this. We will have more webinars in the future. Pak Leo, please, Pak.
Thank you, Ibu Nina. As you said, I and my team listened carefully and took note well of the information conveyed today. I agree with you for this one. And for a closing statement, I would like to say that Indonesia, as other countries in the world, of course, cannot enter the new normal alone. We call for a stronger collaboration to formulate the new development cooperation strategy, which accommodates both the new and adjusted policy and its priority of the government of Indonesia and the interest of our development partner in this new normal era. This normal era has given us more opportunity to create a stronger and better system in our development cooperation to reshape the future development cooperation. I may not yet have the right answer of what it would be, but I believe with everyone here bringing their expertise and experiences, we can finally find the answer not only a new normal, but also a better normal in our development cooperation. Finally, in this opportunity, I would like to say thank you for all excellent panelists, for Ibu Nina, for KSI, and all of the audience. Thank you very much. Semoga kita tetap sehat.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, now we come to really closing. It's already 12:30 more, and we've been discussing for almost 2.5 hours. There are a number of things that I could share with you that we have learned from the minister's viewpoint, as well as the statement of our development partners, that the new normal is a new opportunity to build a new shape of partnership for a better life of our people. And therefore, we have to work together, even closer, to detail so that we can have concrete and doable ideas. Now we have to go into having concrete and doable ideas for the future of our development cooperation. Let's go down to earth what we are going to do. And this will contribute to Bappenas in developing a strategy on Indonesia's development cooperation in the next 5 years by adapting this new normal situation. Finally, Your Excellencies, panelists who are still with us, Pak Leo, who is very patient listening to all of these important views from the panelists, and also the questions from the audience. There are many questions, Pak Leo, and I should apologize the audience that all of the questions cannot be answered, but I ensure you that all the questions will be valuable input for Bappenas in developing a better strategy for improving and strengthening the international cooperation. Thank you again. And I will have to assure that this will not be the last virtual discussion. And we are aiming to conduct this discussion with definitely by engaging other development partners. So we all could contribute and brainstorm the best fit approach and joint strategy with our development partners. Thank you, KSI, for facilitating this discussion. And again, thank you, Pak Alastair, for supporting this. And I know that Pak Winfried and Ibu Satu will be, supporting Pak Leo. They are ready to work closely with you, Pak Leo. So at least there are big partners who are very, how do you say that? Very loyal to our cooperation as our best friends. And to start engaging Indonesia with the region, so that we can exchanging our experiences, especially in ASEAN, as one of the leaders in ASEAN. Thanks again. This webinar is recorded, and you can rewatch if you would like to listen to all of the views, valuable views of the panelists in asumsi.co and Bappenas RI YouTube channel. Thank you once again for KSI for hosting this valuable discussion. See you in another time. Safe and stay healthy. Sampai jumpa.
Thank you, Nina.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Thank you.